Professional actors, you go in and just jump in and do it, best of your ability.
Let me say, can I say one thing? Please. To me, Stanley, the great Stanley Kubrick, was an actor's enemy. And I can point.
Robert Duvall is one of Hollywood's most respected and complex actors, a man known for his unmatched realism, fiery temper, and deep dedication to his craft. But behind that legendary career lies one of Hollywood's most infamous feuds, one that few truly understood until now. Over the years, Duvall has worked with the greatest names in cinema: Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, Gene Hackman, and many others. Yet among all of them, there was one man he reportedly could not stand. Rumors have long swirled about Duvall's explosive temper on set and his unwillingness to tolerate what he saw as phoniness. To him, acting was sacred. It was about truth, discipline, and respect for the work. So when he clashed with another Hollywood giant whose ego often dominated the room, things got ugly fast. The man Robert Duvall truly hated, more than anyone, wasn't just a co-star. He was a legend in his own right. Their on-screen chemistry was electric, but off-screen. Their relationship was toxic, filled with arguments, resentment, and moments that would permanently scar both men's reputations. Duvall never hid his feelings. He was talented, he once said, but impossible to respect. Now, decades later, the truth behind that feud is finally being revealed. The real reason Robert Duvall couldn't stand him. What happened on set that no one dared to talk about, and why, even after all these years, he still refuses to forgive. This is the story of pride, passion, and a clash between two of Hollywood's greatest forces. It was the early 1970s, a golden era for American cinema. The film industry was changing rapidly, moving away from glamorous studio productions and into gritty, realistic storytelling. At the center of this transformation stood two men whose passion for acting burned brighter than most: Robert Duvall and Marlon Brando. When the two were cast together in The Godfather, audiences saw pure magic on screen. Brando, the seasoned icon known for his unpredictable genius, played the powerful Don Vito Corleone. Duvall, the disciplined and quietly intense actor, portrayed Tom Hagen, the family's loyal consigliere. But behind the scenes, their relationship was anything but peaceful. Robert Duvall was a method actor in the truest sense, disciplined, serious, and deeply invested in the craft. He came from a background where respect for the work meant everything. Brando, however, was famously rebellious, often disregarding direction and mocking Hollywood traditions. What began as professional admiration quickly turned into tension. During filming, Duvall reportedly grew frustrated with Brando's laid-back attitude. Brando would show up late, improvise lines, and sometimes refuse to rehearse. To Duvall, this wasn't artistic freedom, it was disrespect. He once said, Brando was brilliant, but he didn't take the work seriously anymore. Yet the feud wasn't born from one incident. It simmered through years of competition and clashing egos. Both men were perfectionists, both hated compromise, and both wanted the respect of their peers. What made matters worse was how Hollywood adored Brando's eccentricity, but overlooked Duvall's quiet brilliance. As filming wrapped, the tension between them was palpable. Brando's charm had captivated audiences and critics alike, but Duvall walked away with a bitterness that would last a lifetime. He felt overshadowed, disrespected, and dismissed, and he never forgot it. The real conflict between Duvall and Brando wasn't just about acting styles. It was about integrity, recognition, and pride. As The Godfather's success swept through Hollywood, both Robert Duvall and Marlon Brando became legends overnight. Critics called it the greatest ensemble cast ever assembled, but inside that circle of fame, a quiet resentment was growing. Duvall respected Brando's legacy, but couldn't overlook what he saw as arrogance. On set, Brando often refused to memorize lines, relying on cue cards hidden around the set. To Duvall, a man who lived and breathed preparation, this was the ultimate insult to the craft. He had all the talent in the world, Duvall once remarked, but no discipline left. The tension wasn't just about method, it was about values. Duvall believed acting was a sacred craft, built on honesty and hard work. Brando, by contrast, saw acting as a tool, something to manipulate, to challenge convention, to mock when it became too serious. That philosophical divide created a rift that could never be repaired. It didn't help that Brando's larger-than-life personality dominated every room he entered. Directors and crew members tiptoed around him, afraid to upset the star. Meanwhile, Duvall, who gave consistent and nuanced performances, often went unpraised. They all bowed to Brando, a crew member recalled, but it was Duvall who kept the movie real. When The Godfather was nominated for the Academy Awards, Duvall's frustration deepened. Brando famously refused his Oscar in protest of Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans, a gesture that made global headlines. While many hailed Brando as a hero, Duvall privately saw it as another act of self-centered drama. That moment was the breaking point. To Duvall, it wasn't about activism or art. It was about stealing the spotlight. He never forgave Brando for turning what should have been a celebration of everyone's hard work into another performance. By the time The Godfather Part 2 came around, Brando had alienated so many people in Hollywood that he didn't return. Duvall, however, stayed, but only after demanding equal pay, a move inspired by years of watching Brando reap the rewards. It was his way of reclaiming respect. What started as creative friction had now turned into lifelong resentment. And for Duvall, the rivalry would define how he viewed not just Brando, but Hollywood itself. When the cameras stopped rolling, and the era of The Godfather faded into film history, the tension between Robert Duvall and Marlon Brando didn't simply disappear. It solidified into a cold, unspoken hostility that followed them for the rest of their careers. While Brando retreated from Hollywood's spotlight, becoming increasingly eccentric and selective about his roles, Duvall thrived. He built a reputation for quiet intensity, winning acclaim in films like Apocalypse Now, Tender Mercies, and The Apostle. Yet behind every interview and award speech, Brando's shadow seemed to linger. Duvall rarely spoke about him, but when he did, his words cut deep. Brando was a genius, he once admitted, but he was also his own worst enemy. It wasn't bitterness, it was disappointment. Duvall had admired Brando's early brilliance, but watching him squander it under the weight of ego and self-destruction was painful. To Duvall, that was unforgivable. Their paths might have crossed again in the 80s, when directors floated the idea of reuniting the two icons in a drama about old Hollywood legends. But Duvall refused. "I've worked with difficult men," he reportedly said, "but I don't work with chaos." The message was clear. The wound had never healed. As the years passed, Brando became increasingly isolated. His health declined, and his once commanding presence shrank into a shell of the man who had changed cinema forever. When Brando died in 2004, Duvall's reaction was telling. There was no grand tribute, no public sorrow, only a quiet acknowledgement. "He was a great actor," Duvall said simply. "One of the best." But those who knew Duvall best understood the subtext. His respect for Brando's talent was real, but so was his disgust at how little that talent was valued by the man himself. For Duvall, it wasn't hatred for hatred's sake. It was about principle, about watching someone betray the very art form he'd dedicated his life to preserving. And in that silence, Duvall's feelings spoke louder than any outburst ever could. Time has a way of softening even the hardest edges. But in the case of Robert Duvall and Marlon Brando, it only deepened the contrast between two men who loved the same craft, but lived it in entirely different ways. Their feud, though decades old, became a parable about Hollywood itself. The eternal clash between discipline and chaos, humility and ego, art and indulgence. By the time Duvall reached his later years, he had built a career grounded in respect, not just for himself, but for the art of storytelling. Every role he took, from Lonesome Dove to The Apostle, carried the same truth he demanded from everyone around him. He never needed to be the loudest man in the room. His performances spoke for him. Brando, on the other hand, became a symbol of what happens when genius turns inward. His early brilliance in On the Waterfront and A Streetcar Named Desire changed acting forever, but his later years were marred by reclusion, financial trouble, and personal turmoil. To Duvall, this wasn't tragedy. It was waste. He had everything, Duvall once reflected, but he let it all slip away. And yet, even in his criticism, there was a kind of reluctant respect. Duvall understood what it meant to fight for authenticity, to push against a system that prizes fame over craft. In Brando, he saw the mirror image of himself, a man equally obsessed with truth, but unable to control the fire that fueled him. Today, their story serves as a reminder that greatness often comes at a cost. Hollywood loves legends, but it rarely loves discipline. And in that balance, men like Duvall often stand alone. The feud between Robert Duvall and Marlon Brando wasn't just about pride. It was about philosophy, about two men who saw acting as something sacred, but who could never agree on what that truly meant. And while Brando's name may be etched into the mythos of rebellion, it is Duvall's quiet, unwavering integrity that endures. In the end, Duvall didn't need to shout to make his point. His work, honest, controlled, and deeply human, became his legacy. And perhaps, somewhere deep down, even Brando would have understood that.